I am Miss Maine Earth, Sarah Phelps.
I grew up in Southwest Harbor, Maine, which neighbors Acadia National Park. The saying, "leave it better than you found it," is something I've adopted into my everyday life. I come from an area that's recognized for its physical beauty. People in Maine take great pride in protecting and maintaining all that we have to offer so that we can continue to share it with others. The leaders of our very unique community empower the youth to take charge in the fight against climate change. Everyone is equipped with knowledge and support starting from a very young age. In middle school, I was fortunate to have an active leader in the classroom that taught us about global environmental issues. Our class installed a windmill that's still active to this day, and we were a part of solar panel, recycling, and food waste projects. Community plays such a large role in the Maine lifestyle that it comes at no surprise that I value it so highly. My community is made up of family and friends from all over that share similar values. Change can be made on an individual level, but it's so much more impactful when people get involved. A large part of my community comes from who I've met through sport. Athletics have always held a special place in my life. I believe firmly that grassroots athletics are crucial to a thriving culture. My brother John grew up participating in sport as a deaf athlete. I've seen firsthand what sport can create and what it can take away. I want to create welcoming, inclusive environments for youth athletes regardless of their ability, race, gender, or socioeconomic class. I have my master's in sport leadership with a focus in sports psychology, which means I help athletes train their mind as much as they train their bodies. Topics such as growth mindset, motivation, and confidence are all within the realm of sports psychology. I have always tended towards leadership positions, whether that was being captain of teams I participated in or through my academic and professional career. I was a mentor for undeclared freshmen and helped them navigate their first year of college, and I also studied female leadership in Division I collegiate athletics. I was able to present my research findings at the university level as well as the national level. Those findings showed that building strong relationships, effective communication, and accountability were the best qualities of being a leader. I joined Miss Earth USA because community is important to me. Being surrounded by women that take environmental initiative in their day-to-day lives and also foster inclusive atmospheres for people of all shapes and sizes is something so incredibly special. I'm excited to have the opportunity to show more of who I am and what I do. As the next Miss Earth USA, I would work every day to build strong relationships and expand my community, communicate effectively with all that I come in contact with, and hold myself and those around me accountable for the environmental work that needs to be accomplished.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Adrian from the Pageant Project, and I have my guest here, Sarah Phelps, who is Miss Maine Earth 2022. Sarah, how are you? Welcome to the show.
I am so excited. Thank you so much for having me.
We've had a little bit of technical hiccups getting on, so apologies we're a little bit late. But we are here, and I actually want to start Sarah off with something I don't normally start off with. I was just looking at the video. I've seen your video multiple times, but this time I was just looking at the photos you took of the video, and it's so pretty. And I know that you mentioned that you wanted to chat about Maine and Acadia National Park.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like there's a lot of special significance for you about where you grew up. So tell us a little bit more about Maine, because I've interviewed Marissa before, and I told her the only thing I know about Maine is Maine lobsters. And she's a vegetarian, so she doesn't even eat the lobsters. But tell us a little bit more about Maine and specifically Acadia National Park.
Absolutely. So I love talking about the state. I'm very proud to be representing it. I come from a really unique kind of background and area. I live quite literally on the same island as the national park. So it's not something that many people can say they have the same opportunity, but it's incredibly beautiful wherever you go. And it's kind of the classic, I didn't appreciate it until I left, that I really was like, wow, this is something so special. I think we should fight to protect it. I think we should talk about it frequently. And I'm very proud of where I grew up and talking about Maine lobster and kind of what we're known for. I feel like whenever I meet someone that doesn't know much about the state, the first thing I say is, well, have you heard of Acadia National Park or Bar Harbor? And it's almost that immediate connection of, yes, oh, I actually know exactly where that is. It's beautiful. And so it always sparks conversation. It always creates connections. It's something really special.
And you mentioned somewhere that the community you grew up in was a special community, and I think you had like a leader or something like that. Tell us a little bit about more. Tell us about that because I've not actually heard that before. Obviously, I've met people who are proud about where they've grown up. There are places, there are many, many beautiful places, but I've not heard specifically that in the education system or in the community that there are actually specific programs to help you appreciate the local area more.
Yeah, absolutely. I was very lucky. My science teacher in middle school, her name was Bonnie Byrne. She still teaches now. She played such an active role in education and not just giving you a strong science-based knowledge, but also just community awareness, what's going on in your state, what's going on globally. And something that I thought was really important that she did was make it clear that you as an individual, you at the time as a middle school student can make an impact just because you're young or just because you're an individual doesn't mean that you should not try. The biggest thing that she kind of imprinted on us is like, put your best foot forward, make the effort, and then see what that does. And it's really carried through with me. And obviously, I'm now part of the Miss Earth organization. So it was a lasting impression. But something really notable that she did with our class and surrounding classes is projects throughout the year. So actually, my middle school class fundraised and installed a windmill for the school. It's still active to this
Yeah.
day. It creates a lot of energy. So it's really cool. And it's something that I'm really proud that I got to be a part of.
You sound like you actually had a really enjoyable school experience. I can't second that, and I know most people probably, at least the ones I talk to, can't. How was your school experience then?
It was incredible, and I almost feel that I was so blinded to what schooling may be for other people because we just had teachers and parents and students that really cared about what was going on in the school.
Yeah.
Science class for me was amazing. I loved it. I learned so much, but it didn't stop there. Gym class was fun. We had an incredible art teacher, and the projects that I'll tell my friends we did in middle school, they're like, I'm sorry, what did you do? We learned about, we did a lot of wood saw cutting, we did jewelry making, we would paint and draw the classics, but we did a lot of medium work. So it was really interesting. It was just a very holistic educational experience.
I'm jealous. I if I had school over again, I'm going to do it in Maine.
Yeah.
What's the name of the school?
Pematic Elementary School, and you're there from kindergarten to 8th grade. So you know everyone in the school by the time you're ready to graduate. I think I had 17 students in my 8th grade graduating class.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I had like 20 something students just in my class, and there were seven classes in the same. Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
it's the community that you're growing up in. Is
Mhm.
it that you grew up in? Was it quite small and connected, or was it huge and sort of nameless?
It was my immediate community quite small, very connected, and I had kind of an interesting role in that. So very small already, but my dad was the community youth director, so he knew a lot of the families and a lot of the kids going through sporting programs would meet him and subsequently me. So it was already small, but he really expanded past the people you would probably primarily know, and so I got to know a lot of people. And we really stuck to that one town. So the way that the island is set up is each town has their own middle school and elementary school. And then for high
All
school,
right.
you come together. So in high school, you have a bigger class, but those initial grades, it's really just you and the 18 people that are your age also.
And I was watching one of your interviews you did, I think, a couple of years ago,
Mhm.
and I understand that for study you moved to another state.
I
You found
did.
it a bit of a culture shock, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly. And are you back in Maine now?
I am. Yeah, I live in Southern Maine now, so I'm not in MDI, unfortunately, but I do go visit as often as I can.
Right. Where did you move to study? That was such a culture shock. I obviously I'm not American, so I love to hear
Yeah,
about the different states and what
yeah.
because you guys are quite you got a bit of a rivalry going on between someone who comes from the south versus you got the east coast and west coast. So where did you go to for study? That was such a culture shock.
I I moved to Ohio. I moved to Oxford, Ohio for Miami University master's program. It's 40 minutes north of Cincinnati, and it's right on the Indiana border. So it was Midwest through and through. And I just remember my first 2 weeks, it, the part that I was in was heavy with farming. So every time I would go outside, I was just kind of like, there's something in the air here. I don't know what it is, but I don't like it. And I'm not sure. No one else seems to be bothered by it. So maybe it's just me.
Did you ever find out what was in the air? I mean, you mean like just
Uh,
metaphorically, or was it like pollen or pollution, or what was
it
in the
was
air?
it was a mix of manure and just stagnant
Oh,
air. Yep. So it was to me, I'm like, no one else seems bothered by this, but it is strong.
after you've described Maine so beautifully, it makes me think, what's it like to move to Ohio, where there's a faint whiff of manure in the air? Um, but but that brings us on to, I think, neatly onto your study. And the reason I really wanted to chat to you was primarily your study, because I have coached tennis for going on 10, 15 years, focusing specifically on women in high school. So for us, that's year 7 to year 12, which is ages 13 to 18. And what always fascinated me was sports psychology, because I always thought, at least in tennis and to a degree in all sports, you've got your skill set, your physical skill set, but normally the person who wins on the, because everyone who compete, roughly, they're a talented athlete if you're going to get to the professional level. And what separates them really is that little, the 3 millimeters of the mental difference. So tell us more about that field of study, what you learned. You also talked about female leadership, which is something that I really want to dive into.
Yeah.
And then obviously yourself, you've been heavily into athletics, and we
Mhm.
saw a few photos with you holding a basketball. And it's not the typical pageant photo of you posing with a
No.
basketball. You actually look like you know what to do with it, which I appreciate. So tell us more about sports psychology and female
Yeah.
leadership.
I want to start. So I did notice when I was doing my digging to see like what's this interview going to be like, where are we going to connect? I saw the tennis and I
Mm,
immediately clung to that. Tennis and golf alike. It's a subject that comes up really frequently when you talk about the 2 years that I spent studying this. And it's because exactly what you said. It's just those games are incredibly mental because
mm.
regardless of how talented you are, if you have that mental break, it's really hard to battle through that. Um, so, in layman's terms, sports psychology is training your brain just as much as you would train your muscles. And for athletes, it's something that kind of spans anywhere from motivation to anxiety. It can be time management skills and confidence skills, and kind of what you would do in those situations if you feel like you're struggling. How are you going to bring yourself out of that? Because you don't always have the time to talk to a coach or talk to a ref or kind of
Mm.
give yourself that moment. So, what are you going to do in that time to either hype yourself up, calm yourself down, get yourself to where you need to be?
I mean, in tennis specifically, for the most part, it's actually illegal to talk to your coach. So you
Hmm.
can't bring. It's not like other sports where you have a coach on the side. I mean, you do have the
Right.
coach, but if the umpire actually sees even the coach using their fingers to give you hand signals, you as a player can get the warning. So
Right.
in terms of, because you've played a lot of basketball, obviously that's a team
Yes.
sport. Did you notice any difference? For example, you mentioned golf and tennis. They're obviously solo sports.
Yes.
Basketball is very heavily a team sport. Did you notice any difference between sports psychology for individual sports versus team sports?
I think, yes, there are a number of differences, but what I noticed the most, or at least what had the biggest impact on my memory, was the idea of motivation. And in a team sport, you have those extrinsic factors. You have your teammates, you have the coach, you have people that are always in your view. With tennis and with golf, it's really you have that external motivation, but it's really a lot of what are you doing? How can you
Mm.
improve? You can't rely on anyone else to bring it unless you're in the doubles, then you can have a
Yeah,
partner.
yeah,
But I think motivation factors are something that really stands out when you look at the difference between team sport and individual. And even in team sport, you have to be internally motivated because you still need to bring your part to the team. So it's something that's really interesting. Sports psychology is a lot of individualized work because
Mm.
everybody is different, obviously. You can't teach a blanket statement to a group of people and know that it's going to land with everyone. You really have to individualize it for the person.
And in sports psychology, at least in
Mhm.
tennis, and what we're told publicly, because I imagine a lot of the work goes on is behind the scenes and we're not told about it, because you don't necessarily want to tell people you're getting sports psychology help. But often in tennis, the usual story that we hear is so and so choked hard. They were up 5-love, 40-love match point, found a way to lose. Now they're seeing basically a sports shrink. And that but they forever are sort of tarnished with this brush off. They've got the yips or they're a choker, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. So there's that side, which is like, if I call it the remedial side. So you've had a
Mhm.
very public meltdown. Now you need help. But I imagine there's now, at least in this day and age, there's work that's proactive, right? So there's work
Yes.
that goes on before that. So hopefully you never have to go through that meltdown. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's very accurate. And I think especially now people are engaging with this idea of training your brain before you get to that moment. So that even if that moment happens, which choking is a phenomena that's heavily studied, especially now, just because it
Right.
happens so frequently. And they almost want to prove like to which degree is are we considering this choking? And how big of a mess up does it have to be for this to be choking or how small? So that's a really interesting phenomena. But um, yeah, it's I could talk forever about this topic. So I get a lot of distracting side thoughts of, oh, I've
I'm
heard
I-
this and I want
I'm
to
I'm
go move.
happy. I'm happy to dig into it. I don't know how heavily. I don't know, like, what I've read is similar
Mhm.
to what you've studied. I
Yeah.
remember I was fascinated with sports psychology because I taught myself tennis.
Mhm.
So then you also have the struggle of for me it was an entirely individual battle. But learning about flow state, which is kind of the
Mhm.
opposite to choking, and reading that by Cheek Sent Me High, that person whose name no one can pronounce. Um, but in terms of the sports psychology and then taking it to outside life, there's a lot of connection, isn't there? I mean, you're
Mhm.
obviously about to compete in Miss Earth USA, one of the
Yeah.
biggest pageants in the US. And look, you can call pageantry a sport, and before you get on stage, you have maybe some nerves. Some people don't, apparently. Some people just get really excited. But interview is a big choking point,
Mhm.
talking about choking for a lot of contestants because they get really nervous before interviews. So, talk to me about the crossover, if you've noticed any, between
Yeah,
sports
absolutely.
psychology and the psychology in pageants or just everyday life.
Yeah, the transferability for sports psychology or psychology in general, but it can
Yeah.
go into every part of your life, and you don't realize it until you're in a moment where you're on stage and you all of a sudden have to get into that flow state and really perform, and you start enacting all of these things that you learned about, and I remember getting off stage one of the first times, and I was like, "That was what my professor was telling me about. It makes total sense now." And you have those moments where it clicks, but it transfers really well. I'm really thankful that I have this education because I'm very self-aware and I'm aware of kind of what I might need in terms of calming myself down or hyping myself up because flow state is really important. And on stage, you only have 30-ish seconds to make an impact. So you want to make sure that you're fully there and fully performing at your best. And it's very similar to athletics. So in terms of I have pretty extensive history in performing, but bringing it to a new stage, it definitely shocks you a little bit. So I was happy to have that educational background.
You've just mentioned, much like Marissa did, Marissa said she's very, very self-aware,
Yes.
um, and maybe a bit too much in her head. I'm the same way. And you just said that as well. Now, normally, flow state, you don't want to be too in your head because that
Right,
takes you out of flow state. So, do
right.
you ever struggle with, okay, on one hand, I'm really self-aware, which is a good quality, but
Mhm.
taken too far, you literally can't get into the flow state because you're having this ongoing conversation in your head. It's almost noticing things that you're in flow state, which then takes you out of flow state. So do
Right.
you ever have to balance those two?
Yes, absolutely. I wish that I could set up a chart for you right now with my fingers to that would be
Go for it.
awesome. Um, every person is individual, and
how much pressure you need versus how much relaxation you need, it's going to change. For me personally, being self-aware, eh, I don't ever find that I hit my max because I feel really confident in what I'm able to do on stage. And I think that's the fine line is when people don't feel confident in what they're going to be doing, it gives you more of a flex between being too aware or being too relaxed.
Yeah.
And you really have to be, at the end of the day, you have to be confident in what you're able to do. And even if you are having a moment where it's, okay, maybe it's not the best, just reminding yourself, I've done this before, I can do it again. Or if you haven't done it before, I've practiced, I've really put myself in a great position. Let's take a deep breath, let's find our state, and let's kind of move from there. But being self-aware, it can really help because you register those feelings and you know what you're doing, but it can also inhibit you because you do start to think, well, I do this thing when I'm walking where I'll point my finger and I don't know why I do it, but just one finger goes really stiff. And so if I start thinking too heavily about that, all of a sudden I have a stiff finger and it's throwing my whole thing off.
Are you supposed to have relaxed fingers? Or one finger just goes rigid and you can't?
Exactly. I feel like my normal hand just kind of falls at my hip. It's very
Yeah.
fluid. And then if I get stiff, that's my giveaway. This finger just flexes. It's very odd.
But that's the worry. So you get in your head when you're self-aware, and then that's all you can
Mhm.
think about. And once you think about it, and you go, "I better not have stiff finger. I better not have a stiff finger. I better not have a stiff finger." Then next thing you know, you've got a stiff finger. Um,
Yeah.
you mentioned confidence. Now, this is a really interesting one because we know
Yes.
that confidence is one of those qualities that we really need in order to succeed. And most of the time, the people we look up to, whether it's in athletics, politics, business, whatever it is, one of the reasons we look up to them is a self-awareness, hopefully. And then the other thing is confidence. We go, oh, that person is so confident. I can never be like that. Now, talk to me about what you can do to get the confidence. Because so often the conversation is, oh, she's such a confident person. I could never be like that. And I really disagree because it's like, if you talk like that, then yes, that's going to be your truth. But
Yeah.
how can someone who's, let's say, not so naturally confident get confident, particularly if they don't have the track record of success? Because I'm going to cut you loose in a sec. I can see you're ready to go. But
No,
a lot of
I'm
people
not.
go,
I'm ready.
a lot of people go, oh, well, of course, Michael Jordan is confident. Let's take him as an example because he's so talented, he's so successful. Of course, he's confident, not realizing he got cut from his high school basketball team. And he said the reason he was confident was because he practiced so much that at the point the ball, is gone from his hand, there's nothing else he can do. So I'll let you loose now, Sarah. Talk to us about confidence and how you can get it in your life.
I think you said it almost perfectly. It's confidence is something you can fake it. You can fake it, and other people will kind of believe, like, oh, yeah, she knows what she's doing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think the best way to build it is repetition by trying. And
Mhm.
you mentioned Michael Jordan. I think that's the perfect example because he got cut. And rather than let that totally diminish his experience, he started practicing and he started putting in this effort and this work where probably the next time that he was measured externally, he was like, you know what? I've done this work. I've put in this effort. I'm going to do the best that I can. And that's going to be enough. And you can be proud of that progress. You can mark that progress. And it's something that slowly you'll be able to start building that confidence. And that's transferable outside of athletics. That happens anywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think in pageants, especially, the women that I've met, we do a lot of walking practice together.
Mhm.
And when you are walking practicing, you start to think, well, my fingers really flex right now. And you only focus on that. And you kind of have to build it in blocks so that when it's time to bring it all together, I've done this before. Let's take a deep breath. Let's just go out and show what we've been working
Mhm.
on. So it's something you do in really small steps, but then all of a sudden, when it's time to show what you've done, you feel that you have something to lean on that's strong.
Now, I also know that you mentioned growth mindset. I don't know if
Mhm.
it's in the email you sent to me or it's in the initial video, but I don't know if you've read the book. I think it's literally called Growth Mind.
It
You're nodding your
is.
head. Okay.
Yep.
So by Carol Dweck, I believe. Now,
Mhm.
I think I have a copy of the book over there and I listened to it on audio. I found that fascinating because
Mhm.
because I want to get your thoughts on it. So, growth mindset basically is this idea that you focus on the work you've put in and how
Mhm.
you're progressing rather than winning the trophy or not. Now, that
Right.
obviously is huge in pageants, probably more so than any other sport because it's so subjective. You could
Yes.
actually be the best version of yourself and still not win, and that can be
hmm
crushing. So, talk to us about growth mindset and how far did you go, yes, that's the right way to be? And did you go, well, but I also want to win at the same time? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking to myself, we definitely have growth mindset somewhere in this library.
That's a big library of actual books.
Yeah. There's more to my right here that you can't see them, obviously, but
Wow.
my sister is a very big reader. So if you ever need to borrow a book, I'll ship it. Don't worry. She'll never notice.
Wow.
um, Growth mindset. It's actually the book that I read that initially got me interested in this topic. And it's something so interesting because it's not something that you either have or don't have. It's something that you work on. And it's something that, with being self aware, you can have honest conversations with yourself. And it kind of plays hand in hand with positive self talk. And, rather than saying, I'm not very good at this, or I'm not very good at math. That's my prime example. Instead of saying that and focusing on, I'm not very good at this, I'm just not going to do it, you kind of flip and say, you know what, math is not my strongest thing that I'm able to do, but I'm working on getting better. It's something that I'm putting a lot of effort in. And so I think
Mm,
growth mindset is something you just have to be relentless about. And it's, I'm not bad at this. I'm working on being better at this. And with pageants and with the idea of it being completely subjective, I had a perfect example of practicing growth mindset. My second pageant that I competed in, I placed first runner up, which is
mhm.
incredibly difficult just with mindset and kind of almost grieving after that. You work so hard for this title and now it's
Yeah.
gone and someone else won it. And a fantastic woman beat me. I think she was incredible. It's really hard to feel upset in that moment because everybody on stage is incredible and you never know who's going to win. But it is a lot of self reflection. And you have this
Yeah.
moment of, I gave five other people the power to see the best version of me and not pick that. And it's really hard.
Mhm.
Um, and I struggled a lot with this. Well, what could I have done better? Where was I lacking? What did I need to do? And going into my next pageant, it was a lot of, you know what? I am very proud of the work that I put in. I'm proud of who I am and the woman that I'm turning myself into. And I'm going to give my best performance again. And if I win, that's amazing. It's been recognized. But if I don't, I still recognize that. And that's what's important. And the second that I learned that and kind of had that conversation with myself, that's when I was like, pageantry is amazing. I never want to leave this field. This is incredible. And instead of remembering the subjectiveness of judging, just remembering
Mm.
you're bringing your best. And that's really all that you can offer.
Now, you've done a lot of sport,
Yes.
and some sport is subjective if we talk about
Yeah.
gymnastics, for example, but even then, there's very objective criteria as what you have to deduct if someone does something wrong. What I love about sport and tennis is that if I win or lose, it's very clear why. It's not a personal thing. You know what I mean? Like if I hit
Right.
the ball, it goes in. That's because I did that. Objectively, it's in. We can't argue about whether it was right or not. We have clear
Right.
rules. Now, pageantry, it does not have those rules. For better or worse, it
No.
doesn't say, okay, if Sarah has stiff finger, we deduct a point from her in her run. So did you struggle at all with that? Because in my mind, yes, it's growth mindset and psychology always comes
Mhm.
into everything that we do.
Right.
But did you struggle at all with the fact that pageantry is a bit more a lot more subjective versus basketball? For example, if
Mhm.
you sink a basket, we're not going to
Yeah.
discuss whether you get the points or not. You get the points. Whereas
Right.
pageantry, you can feel like you nailed something, and other people sometimes can say, "Oh, you nailed that. You were better than her," which is very dangerous. Did you
Yes.
struggle at all with that?
Um, I did, but I actually want to talk about my family and how they struggled with this because it's really interesting. As the competitor, I feel like I adjusted pretty well to that idea of you're not really sure how you're going to be judged. So
Yeah,
just go and give it your best. And I was kind of like that as an athlete too. Just try your best. Let's see what happens. The rest is up
yeah,
to somebody else. We'll figure
yeah.
it out afterwards. So I feel like I adjusted pretty well to that. But something that I find so hilarious is my first pageant. my family and I were so new to this world, and so we're walking in, I've been checked in, and my sister's like, um, "So do we get a rubric or, like, how do we judge this? What's gonna happen here?" And I was like, "No,
Rubric.
you don't." I'm like, You don't have to worry about it. You cheer when I come on stage, and that's it." So since then, they have really leaned into being a pageant fan, and we've watched like Miss America, we watched the other night, we watched Miss USA recently, and they get so invested because they're like, "Oh, she's so amazing," and getting clips of interviews, they're like, She's incredible, how could she not win? I don't understand this." And
Yep.
they're so funny because they try to make it fully objective, and it's really funny watching them try to adjust from athletic fan to pageant fan. Yeah, but they do still think that rubrics should be passed out in the stands, and we're gonna try and adjust. I should print them one for Miss Earth.
There's always a first time for everything. That is the first time in over 300 interviews I've heard the word rubric in one of my interviews. You know, the best way to educate them about what it's like is to actually get them
Mhm.
compete in a pageant themselves. That's
I
when they'll
agree.
get it. That's when they'll get it. So,
I agree.
kick them into it. I have to ask. So, obviously, female leadership is something that you
Yes.
studied.
Mhm.
Um, I was trying to be Snoopy and find. I don't know if you did. Was a dissertation or a thesis
Mhm.
or whatever. I was trying to find it so I could read it. I couldn't find it. But talk to me about female leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a senior in college, and I was presented with the really awesome opportunity to join a research team. If you want to look her up, her name is Karen Collins. She was my professor, and she does amazing work. She's brilliant, and I would trust every word that came out of her mouth because she's never led me astray thus far. So she was really incredible, and when I was given the opportunity, I didn't they were already a little bit into the project, so I joined probably midway through the introductory period. So
Right.
what happened and what my timeline looked like, um, we had a class that was being taught to current leaders and then prospective leaders. And essentially, they were just learning about the different types of leadership and kind of what would be important to them, what they think is important to their team, what's important to the coaches. And we actually conducted that class and then conducted interviews after with the current leaders and with prospective leaders of all the teams at this university. Um, so split into categories. We had perspective, we had current, and then there was also a coaching category. So you really got a holistic look at what was important to these leaders, what was important to these teams, and what did they think was going to make them successful.
Mm.
And I was put in charge of synthesizing the future leaders, the perspectives. So those are your freshmen and sophomores who are making those impacts already or are trying to make those impacts.
Yeah.
And something that I thought was so interesting, and it didn't always work this way, but if your prospective leaders and your current leaders, if those visions align, and your coaches, if those visions align, those teams usually did pretty well. And
Yeah.
it doesn't always translate that way. Sometimes you just have talent and you do really well, and nothing's going to stop that. But something that I thought was really interesting and something that came up pretty frequently with leadership and prospective leaders and what they wanted from their team and what they wanted to bring was this idea of effective communication.
Mm.
And that means not only being able to talk to your teammate, talk to your coach, but also being able to listen and being able to kind of adapt to what your team needs rather than what you think they need.
Yep.
So it was a really good give and take. It was very eye opening for me. We'd had a lot of hours put into just diving through these interviews and seeing different perspectives. We looked at, I think, I want to say 8 different teams. So there was a lot of women involved in this.
Hmm.
We would have loved to expand it outside of the university, but just with the number of people we had working, it wasn't feasible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think one of the most profound things that we learned was just effective communication and how important that is. So I actually got to, and I should have sent this link to you, I got to present our findings just through that initial stage at the university I worked at. And then the following year, I got to present at the national conference for sports psychology. So it was really cool. It was a very interesting situation. And it brings up a lot of good conversation about leadership, especially in the women's world, because
Mm.
it's different. That the leadership required for women is very different than is required for men. And it's something worth studying in its own entity for sure.
I think it's really interesting. I mean, first up, you bring up communication, and then secondly,
Mhm.
the listening aspect of it, and then crossing that over with female leadership versus male leadership. In the school that I was working at, the girls were always being taught, as a future leader, you got to find your voice, you got to find your voice, you got to find your voice, which
Mhm.
means you have to state your opinion. Now, I always thought that was half the equation because you also have to. I mean, your words have consequences, which actually means you do have to listen. Like the
Yeah.
meaning of the communication is the response you get, right? That's a cliche that
Yeah.
we get given. And in general, probably say that women are more, because obviously in a, like say, a boardroom setting, it's not going to be all female. In fact, very often
Mhm.
it's the balance is otherwise. It might be 80% male,
Mhm.
20% female, and it's a giant cliche. You'd say that the men tend to be more aggressive and talk more, and that the women are probably more likely to want to listen. So,
Mhm.
where's the balance in between, if we're talking about female leadership? Because some people will listen too much and they'll be
Yeah.
listening, 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 listening. They never say anything. And you can't really be a leader, I think, unless you actually say something. But there's some
Mhm.
people who talk too much and there's some people who listen too much. So, where's the balance? Specifically for women who may go, oh, I don't want to talk while she's talking, I don't want to interrupt her, but then unless you do a little bit of that, no one ever hears what you have to say. So
Yeah.
where's the balance?
I think the balance doesn't necessarily come from being an individual that can do both. I think you can be a silent leader and I think you can be a very loud leader. But I think where you get balance is if you, not always the case in single team or single athletics versus team athletics, but if you have a group of leaders, I think things that work really well is if you do have a silent leader, let's maybe pair them with somebody that's a little bit louder, a little more
Yeah,
vocal. That way they can collaborate. And there's a little, like, you have to do a little bit extra work. You have to make sure those leaders are kind of on the same page and are willing
yeah,
to collaborate. But rather than ask a silent leader or a quiet leader to step out of their comfort zone and maybe
got
not
it.
feel like they're going to advocate properly,
Yeah.
maybe they just need to talk to one person. And that person that is happy to be loud and happy to be heard will be able to go from there. And it also allows you to have this give and take of, I'm going to listen and I'm going to really work on being able to communicate outwardly and kind of share what I've heard. But the other person that is normally quite loud and happy to be vocal, they
Mhm.
need to work on listening as well. So that when
Yeah.
you have that collaborative space, it's okay, what did you hear? And maybe what did I hear? And where can we figure this out from there? But I think the push and pull comes from bringing in more than one leader. I don't think you necessarily just have to have one. It's probably beneficial to have more than one.
But we're really talking about synergy. So
Yeah.
on a team, it's a 1 + 1 = 3
Mhm.
sort of scenario. Um, can you just talk to me briefly about people who love to speak, maybe a bit too much? How do you get them to learn to listen?
That is
Because we
difficult.
all know that person can't shut up. And then you go, you got to listen more, but they're really bad at it because it's listening is a skill, actually, like
It
any other. And
is.
some people, it's not just sitting there and shutting up. It's actually an active process. So,
Yeah.
how do you teach someone to listen?
That is difficult. I'd love to say you sit them down in a classroom and have a diagram of an ear and say, "This is attached to your head. Let's show you how it functions."
Let's use
Not the
it.
case. That is not always the best case to do it. I think if you want somebody to learn and you want somebody to kind of adjust, you have to take a lot of that responsibility onto yourself. And if
Mm,
you want them to listen, I think one-on-one conversation works really well. And I like to talk. I'm not gonna lie. I like to be the one that's vocal, but I also have worked really hard on listening skills. So in those conversations, if they're gonna talk, be specific in what you pick out from them and then ask very specific questions so that it almost makes them think like, "Oh, you picked that out of
yeah.
all the things that I
Yeah.
just said." And it gives them that second of pause and, "Oh, this is we're communicating now." And then as you keep asking questions, it can kind of give this push and pull that happens naturally. That's not always the case. Sometimes people don't respond in that way and they're just going to continue speaking, but I think you have to put that responsibility on yourself that if you're hoping for them to listen more, pull it out of them a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with asking directly and saying, "Hey, I really value our communication. I think you could get a little bit better at hearing what I'm saying just as much as telling me what you're feeling." I think there's nothing wrong with that direct communication.
Just listening to this and switching the framework to this would be really important in relationships as well. I mean,
Yes.
not only your personal intimate relationship, but just with friends, like
Hmm.
learning to listen. There's nothing funnier to me than watching two people like going on a date and it's clear like they're just not listening to one another. One person's on their phone and this other person's talking about something that's really clear to them, and the other person's like, uh-huh, uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
And it's just very, very awkward.
Hmm.
But tell me, here's a question. How
Okay.
has studying what you studied, and clearly you're passionate about it, and as am I,
Mm.
how has it changed you? So before you took on this area of study, and there's so much stuff
Hmm.
that you've learned, and you go, oh, this applies to this, and this applies to that. How do you feel you've changed as a person studying this area?
It's it's really interesting, and something that I'll say about this time of my life, I started competing in pageantry in 2020. So it's fairly new to my life,
Mhm.
even though this will be Miss Earth will be my fourth stage that I've been on. So I feel like I've done it enough that I know what's happening. But something that's interesting is I started learning about sports psychology at the same time that I started competing. So
Mm.
the personal growth that I've had in these last few years has been tremendous.
I'll
And
bet.
I didn't know that it was going to happen. But I think my favorite part about this is I am much more comfortable and much more confident in who I am, and I'm really proud of the work that I've put in. And when I have interviews and when I have conversations with people, I think it just exudes off of me that I am aware of who I am. I know what I bring to the table. I'm really happy about that. And I put a lot of work in because I'm aware of the steps that it takes to kind of get yourself to where you want to be.
Mm.
Something that I think is really interesting since I've started this work with my education and with pageants, I do a lot of goal work and I do a
Mhm.
lot of it doesn't have to be something that's like shoot for the moon, but just something small. And this year I challenged myself. I just turned 25 in August. So this year I made a list of 25 things that I'd like to do in my 25th year.
Okay.
Um, I should check to see how I'm doing because I lost track a while ago, so I need to bring my list back out. But it ranged from things that I could check off that very same day that I made the list to things that I'm
Yeah.
hoping to check off on the 31st. And I think one of the things that I was most happy to share was um, telling myself that I'm proud of myself. And also
Mm.
telling people that are important to me that they're important to me. And it encourages me to have that direct communication, not only with myself, but with others, and that stems directly from my education in sports psychology, but also in the pageant world, and just having to bring your best self to the table all the time, and really making sure you're kind of hiring the bar every day, and so
Mm.
it's something that I'm really proud of, but those 2 things starting at the same time put me on a journey of self-growth that I was not aware that I was going to be doing.
Well, don't forget the pandemic started in 2020 as well, and everyone had self-growth. I mean, you
Yeah.
must have had an absolute whirlwind because starting in 2020, a lot of the pageants were cancelled or postponed.
Mhm.
In the Miss Earth case, they went virtual, which was a whole
Mhm.
new ball game. I think people who excelled in the virtual world may not have necessarily been the people who would have done best in person. So,
Mhm.
I mean, it must have been a crazy time. 2020, pandemic happens, world
Mhm.
stops. You begin your education in this fascinating field.
Mhm.
You also decide to go into pageantry because clearly you have too much time on your hands and you had nothing better to
Exactly.
do. So, do you even recognize? I mean, you must recognize the person you were before that, but there must be light years of difference
Yeah.
between the two people.
I will say I feel very different, and when I when I meet people that I haven't maybe seen, I guess not meet, when I re-see people that I haven't seen since high school
Yeah.
or maybe even before, I think it's really noticeable, the growth that I've
Mm,
had. But I think the most profound response that I've gotten was actually my sister and I have an amazing relationship. She's one of my best friends, and I'm very fortunate for her. And she's always been somebody that I looked up to in terms of just emotional maturity. She works
yep.
really hard and is very great at that. And we were having a conversation. Fairly, it was fairly personal, very deep, and it was a
Hmm.
very vulnerable topic. Which, when I was younger, I steered clear from that. I did not want any part of that. I would rather just go into my room and not share any more words
Hmm.
about feelings. And we had this moment where it was almost me checking her and, hey, maybe we should think about it from a different angle. And I will never forget, she looked at me and she kinda stopped and she was like, "You're very mature. When did this happen?" And it was very validating for me because I've worked really hard to be that way, and, just to hear someone that I looked up to so greatly say that to
Mm.
me and have that external recognition, yeah, that was such a great moment.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you've had a relationship that's so deep and, run all your life, so to speak,
Mhm.
when a little shift happens and you just go, "Oh, wow." It's similar like with a parent, like maybe the first time you correct a parent or show some
Mhm.
leadership to a parent, it can really, really shift the whole relationship. But I need to ask you, so you're obviously fascinated with the topic of psychology,
Mhm.
sports psychology, female leadership. What are you going to do with it? Because you could apply this, and I ask that because you could apply this to any area.
Mhm.
I mean, psychology is every area, whether it's business or non-profit, whatever it is.
Mhm.
So you said you turned 25, world's your oyster. What are you going to do with it?
That's a great question. Had you asked me 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said, "I'm getting my PhD. I'm working as a sports psychologist. I want to be in the collegiate level. I wanna
Mhm.
work." I think I told my aunt that I wanted to be at the 2028 Olympics. I think they're being
Right.
hosted in LA. I'm not sure if that's totally true, but, um, I those were my goals, and that was something that I was really working towards, and then, you know, being a graduate student during COVID, you're all of a sudden online. There's a lot more restriction to kind of your learning ability, or at least for me,
Yeah.
I had a total goal shift and I had this realization of professional growth for me that doesn't necessarily have to be another degree or working at, in elite sport. That's not necessarily what's going to fuel me. Psychology, like you said, is very transferable and it
Mhm.
goes kind of wherever you need it to go. So I had this moment of, I'm really passionate about this. Do I want to monetize it or do I want it to be
Yeah.
something that I'm just passionate about? And it's interesting
Mm.
because I love talking about it. I love learning about it, but I don't know if it's something that I want to do every single day.
Yeah.
Right now, I work in higher education and I love it. I love what I'm doing. I think it's great work and it's something that I can really build off of. And it's something that does a lot of one on one work. So you're really meeting with a lot of people
Yeah.
and my education gets great use from that. So I feel like I'm still able to use it, but in my personal life, I can take sports psychology and maybe reinvest in community by being a youth coach or being a high school coach and kind of finding different ways to teach people about what I know without directly monetizing it or trying to be at the elite level, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes complete sense because that's something that I struggled with myself because when you're really passionate about something and skilled at it, it can
Mhm.
be a personal struggle as to whether I should monetize it or not. Because in
Right.
some ways, you might feel like you've just been given this gift, even if you've worked hard at it, and it can feel a little bit weird trying to monetize
Mhm.
it, maybe take some of the joy out of it. But if we just back up, and I have to say, out of any interview I've done, this is the longest I've ever gone without really actually talking about pageants, and we're
I
closing
know.
in on an hour, and we've just talked about sports psychology, which I'm okay with because obviously we
I
know
am
there's a
too.
pageant coming up. It's very, very clear. Um, but sport is an integral
Mhm.
part of your life. You've
Mhm.
mentioned athletics. We've seen the photos
Mhm.
of basketball. Now, talk to me about how important sport was in forming your
Mhm.
character, because there's a lot of talk in this day and age about being competitive is a bad thing. And
Yes.
when that conversation came out as a sports coach and as someone who plays tennis, I really had a fundamental issue with people just saying that competitiveness is bad. We should all get a trophy. I had a business coach at the time who was like, "Oh, you should give everyone a trophy," and I'm like,
No.
no, because that was just me because I was slash am deeply competitive. And if I'm
Yep.
getting that trophy, I want it to mean something, right? Not that I
Yep.
beat someone else to a pulp, but I worked for it. Not the participation trophy or you wore green today trophy.
Mhm.
So sports, even though I didn't do sports so much growing up, it was more later
Mhm.
on. That competitive nature and learning in sport to not only win but to lose and to
Mhm.
accept that on the day, sometimes your best isn't enough, but you pick yourself up and you learn from it. So much of that comes from competition and
Mhm.
sport. So I think
Mhm.
it's an absolutely integral part of life. It's not just something
Mhm.
optional you do. It's something that you got to engage in. So
Yeah.
talk to me about how integral sport has been to shaping you.
Kind of a theme that has come up throughout this interview and just my everyday life. Um, Family is very important to me. I've talked about my sister's relationship, and I mentioned that my dad was the youth sport community director. So, I mean, I probably had a basketball in my hand at age 4, and I was running around a gym every Saturday morning from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. because that's what my dad did, so that's what we all did, and all of my best friends participated, and we could never get enough. So, I had a very unique upbringing in the sense that sport connected everything for me. It was quite literally my life, it was my friends, it was my
Yeah.
enjoyment. It dictated a lot of what I did, and I don't regret that at all. It brought me to where I am, but it was really interesting because in my life, my dad really focused on sport at a young age should be fun. That's our main
Mm.
reason. That's our main
Yep.
goal. You are young, you're not trying to be a Division 1 player at age 10. That's not your goal
Mm.
right now. You're learning the sport, you're having a good time, you're making friends. There's still competition. You still want to win, but it's more about let's just see where this takes me.
Yeah.
And then as you get older, it was slowly introduced. Don't get me wrong, I came from a very competitive household. We had battles to see who finished dinner first. So competition was always heavy in my house.
Oh, jeez.
So I'll paint a very honest picture with that. Competition was integral, but it was a lot of fun too. Let's make it
Yeah.
fun. Let's see kind of how we can build it in that way. So fun was important, competition was important, but it wasn't until you got older that you really started to take it more seriously. And
Mm.
then it was a natural transition because you're getting older, the competition is getting fiercer. It kind of just leads your way to that. I think something that happens now, and kind of what you were talking about with that blanket participation, and we're going to celebrate everyone that's there. I don't think that's wrong necessarily because you want people to have fun, you want people to
Yeah.
join. I think where we fall into this kind of trouble area is this early specialization and kind of hoping
Mhm.
that kids will go elite and you start them at age 7 and they're playing year
Oh,
round and this is what they're
yeah.
doing. And I think I grew up and enjoyed sport because it was made fun. I think now we really struggle with this idea of let's just play because it could take you somewhere, but not make it fun. We're just going to do it. So
Yeah.
I was very thankful to have that kind of family balance. And my dad really pushed that. And it just, I mean, it shaped who I was outside of sport. It shaped my respect for people around me, for the sport itself. It shaped my education. It was incredible. And I will say, actually, just to throw a wrench into the whole idea of what I've pictured for myself, is my older brother is actually, he's hard of hearing. He's a deaf athlete. And so not only did I have my dad create this space, but he also created a space that was inclusive and
Mm.
welcoming for kids that weren't able-bodied. And my brother struggled a lot because that's not a disability that you can see when you see him. It's
Yes.
something that you kind of have to dig out of him. So it was really interesting to get that kind of extra layer of sport is incredible. Sport can be so incredible, but
Mm.
also you have to work to make it that inclusive environment.
It's a balance, isn't it? I mean,
Mhm.
including people obviously is something that you want to do, and then, as you said, niching down a bit too early. I mean, I had a lot of that in tennis. The
Mhm.
first conversation with a parent coming to me with a 5-year-old is, "Oh, do you think my child has potential?" And I'm like, I'm not going to answer that question because it's way too early to be thinking like that. And even if
Yep.
they have the potential, do you really want to become a professional athlete? Because at least in tennis,
Right.
that means touring 11 months of the year. Not
Mhm.
everyone's cut out for that. So I take your point, and it's all in balance.
Mhm.
You mentioned you have a competitive family, and you
Yes.
mentioned that you compete over who you sometimes compete. I hope it's not all the time
No.
competing who would, because I had indigestion the other day, like a bit of heartburn, and that's not making me feel comfortable.
No.
But how I love asking competitive people this: how competitive are you? Like, what's the silliest thing that you've ever competed over? Because we talked about
Oh.
Michael Jordan; he was stupidly competitive, right?
Mhm.
Anytime you went out with him, you have to compete over something.
Yeah.
So, how competitive are you?
I mean, that is I am digging through history of just what did we compete about when we were younger? I'll say we growing up in Acadia, we would hike a lot as a family. My dad really enjoyed just getting everybody out and doing it together. Um, we would, on the way back to our car, race down the mountain. My mom was not
Mhm.
okay with this. If she's watching this, Mom, I know you weren't okay with this, but we would race down, and if I made it to the car first, it didn't happen. If my brother made it to the car
Oh,
first, that's not the case either. Because my dad would finally make it down the mountain and he would say, "No, no, no, I called timeout halfway up the hill. So you guys need to go back and you start from there and then we'll do it again."
did you go back to do it again, or you?
When we were younger, we did because we're like, "Ah, he's our dad. We can't say no. We'll go back up and then we'll run back down again." When we got older though, we were like, "No, you lost. You need to be okay with that."
That's a funny story because we went hiking once. I don't hike very often, but when we were younger, my brother and I were hiking with our parents and a group of their friends, and I just decided as the eldest that I wanted to go as fast as I could. And you have to be careful because I hiked so fast and got so far ahead that we got hopelessly lost for like 3 hours before we were able to find the main group again. Of course, when we rejoined them, no one actually realized that we'd not been there for 3 hours and that we were lost. But sometimes competition, Sarah, can lead you astray. When you're too competitive,
Absolutely.
it's not always a good thing. Just to change topics briefly,
Yeah.
pageantry, because I believe you're you're competing in a pageant. In well, actually, when are you leaving for it? Because it's 14 days to the new year. So when are you
Yeah.
leaving? How are you feeling?
I I am leaving the 31st, so I will be leaving
No
in
New
14
Year's
days.
Eve
I
for you?
No, I will be in Orlando ready to go. So I'm leaving the 31st. I It doesn't feel like it's happening already. I'm excited. I'm really ready
Yeah.
for it, but in my head, I'm like, "Oh, I've got plenty of time. It's happening soon, but not that soon." And then I look at my calendar and I'm like, "Oh, I need to be fully packed in 2 weeks. I
Yeah.
need to have all of this done." So I'm really excited. I can't believe it's here already, and there's a little bit of nerves right now, but more
Mhm.
so just a feeling of, you know what, I've done the hard part. Interview has happened already. They know who I am and kind of what I stand for. So let's just show them the fun me that's on the stage and spinning and kind of feeling fabulous. So
Which part what's your favorite part of the competition? You
mm,
mentioned this is your fourth pageant in
it is.
2, 3 years. So what's the part that you found your most favorite?
Um, when I first started, interview was my favorite. I love to talk to people. I love to connect. I like to just be able to share who I am. So originally, I would have said interview. I still love that part, but for me, that's
Mm,
more. Let's get down to business. I'm going to tell you about why I believe that I'm the best, and then we'll go
mhm.
from there. I think now my favorite is probably swim just because it's so fun and upbeat, and it's not a part of myself that 5 years ago I was really confident to share. I got into pageantry because I never felt like I could be sexy or beautiful and also athletic and taken
Yeah.
seriously, and
Yeah.
that is an I mean, that is something very classic of a lot of women that when they get into that
Mhm.
pageantry space, they say that they've struggled with that. So, I know I can do well in interview, but I didn't always know that I could do well on stage in a bathing suit. So I think for me, it's really invigorating, it's really energizing, and I walk off the stage feeling like $1,000,000. Nobody could touch me. It was incredible. So it's a feeling that is unmatched, and it makes me really proud because that's a part of myself that I've never been able to share before, and now
Yeah.
I do it so freely and happily. So it's really awesome.
And if you're lucky enough to have the hardware placed on your head at the end of the competition, what are your plans with the hardware, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. I have so many. It's hard for me to say just 1 or 2. But something that I started doing as Miss Maine Earth is this social media series. It's something
Mhm.
that I post. It's nothing elaborate. I'm not very technologically advanced, so it's really just about connecting with people, and I think I do it really well. Kind of the main feature is learning about businesses that have green initiatives in their business
Mm,
plan. And it can be any range as long as they are making an effort. I really want to highlight that because at the end of the day, that's what's important. Um, so I do it every Sunday, and it's just given me the chance to expand community. That's something that's really important to me. And I love connecting with people. I love expanding my network. So it's something that probably right away I would want to keep that going. If I were to win, that would probably be one of the first things that I do is aside from, hey, this is who I am, this is what I want to
mm.
bring to the table for you all. This is also what I'd like to do. And that would probably be one of the first things that I would enact.
Yeah, bringing awareness to people and businesses who are doing good things
Mhm.
is always a good thing for a title holder. Do you find in your local area that there are many businesses? I mean, bringing it back to Maine, which is where we started this interview.
Mhm.
Are there a lot of businesses in your local area who are doing or taking eco initiatives? I mean, you said it's such a beautiful area, and we've seen the photos.
Yeah.
It's stunning. So, are there hopefully a lot of businesses doing good things?
Yeah. I wish that I started in the beginning of November. I
Hmm.
wish that I had started way back, but the idea only came to me early fall, so I had to kind of set up all the
Yeah,
programs
yeah.
and what I would be doing. Maine is it's a really unique area, and I feel very lucky to be representing it because you have this physical beauty and almost an innate sense to protect it. So the people here are very unique because they are
Mm,
adamant about protecting and doing the work to make it better. And they really respect where they're from and what they're doing. So there's plenty of businesses here. I wish that I could have highlighted more of them, and I would love to continue doing that even after January. I might have to switch it from my Miss Maine Earth account to my personal just to keep it
yeah,
going. But plenty of businesses. I think I would love to continue featuring Maine ones, but I'd also love to challenge myself and expand outside because in
mm,
Maine, people really value this. It's something that a lot of businesses are doing, but I'd love to challenge myself to expand outside to the rest of the country, the rest of the world, and just kind of highlight, hey, if you're in this area, these people are doing amazing things and they're really
yeah.
putting up a great fight. Let's support them and kind of bring awareness not just to my state, but to all of them and to the whole world. That's essentially who I'm trying to impact. So kind of
Yeah.
sharing the wealth there.
Yeah, that sounds great. Sharing the attention around.
Mhm.
Look, just I don't want to get back into sports psychology because I feel like it'll be another 3 hours before we're able to stop talking. Obviously, you find it fascinating, as do I.
Mhm.
I just think about it all the time. It's always running in the back of my head. But outside of pageantry, outside of
Mhm.
everything else, what do you do to relax or unwind, or when you don't want to necessarily think about psychology? What hobbies do you have?
This is a really funny question that you decided to ask because I've been thinking about this a lot. What do I do outside of pageants, outside of work, outside of athletics? What do I do that's fun? And I was laughing to myself because recently, my sister and I got a Nintendo Switch. And I don't know if you've ever played with one of those before, but we are
Yes.
big into Mario Kart right now. It
Oh
is
God.
it is something that we do more than I would like to say, and, we're both very busy people, so it's funny when we find ourselves kind of in one area together, her and her girlfriend and
Hmm.
I will play, and it is hysterical because when I get asked this question, I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I play Mario Kart in my free time."
Who's better, you or your sister?
Oh, I am, for sure, for sure. She's learning, she'll
Yeah,
win.
oh, she's learning.
Her girlfriend also puts up a good fight, but I am so far reigning champ of the household, so I feel great about that.
Okay, now here's a question I have to ask you. See, with tennis games, all right, there are some tennis computer
Mhm.
games, and I am
There are.
rubbish at them. I'm absolute because I play it like I'm playing tennis, right? So
Right.
I have this theory that the better you are at the actual sport, the worse you are when it comes to playing a game based on that sport. Now, since you're so good at Mario Kart, does that mean you are a rubbish driver, Sarah Phelps?
I thought you might have been taking it in that direction. I would like to say, no, I am a fantastic driver and I'm very safe. But
Are you
what I will
sure?
say, yeah, maybe I should pull my sister. If we could pull her into this, she would be able to tell you directly. I will say something that's interesting. Once you play enough Mario Kart, when you get onto the actual road, you start to think to yourself,
Oh no.
oh, The other day I was driving and there is a very distinct course where if you get to the back of a semi truck and it's got a ramp, you get a speed boost if you go off of it. It's amazing. But I passed a semi with the ramp on the back and I was thinking to myself, huh.
If I go up there, I can cut 5 minutes off my commute time.
Yeah, maybe I'll get a speed boost if I just hit it perfectly.
Okay. I feel I need to ask an impartial third party for an evaluation of your driving abilities. If you're driving around in the real world and you're starting to see semi-trailers and go, oh, I could drive up there and go faster. Or if you start having Mario music going off in the back of your head, might be time to see maybe a psychologist or maybe a psychiatrist, actually, at that point. Oh, dear. Okay. Well, just before we get to the final 10, is there anyone you would like to give a shout out to?
Yes, absolutely. My best friend Molly is watching. Hopefully, still. We have been talking for an hour now, so maybe she has nodded off since. But she logged on and has been watching this. She is also soon to be expecting. She's going to be a new mom, so I'm really excited for her.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so I just want to say hi to her. We love you, Molly. We're really excited for your baby. Can't wait to meet her. So.
Perfect. Okay. Well, the final 10 questions. Here we go. Number 1, what is your favorite word?
I will go with the Maine classic and say wicked.
Is that a particular word for you guys in Maine are known for? Is it wicked?
It's, I would say more to New England, but people in Maine use it a lot. But it's that was wicked awesome. Filler word.
Isn't that a bit like 1990s/2000s? Is Maine a little bit behind the times?
A little bit.
We'll say a little bit old school, not behind the times. A little bit old school.
A little old school. We're bringing it back today.
Wicked awesome. That was, oh my God. I
Once
feel like
you
we're going
start
back.
using it, it'll happen a lot more than you realize.
Okay, thank you. You've put it in my head. What's really going on in my head now is the Mario theme, because you talked about Mario Kart. Now I have the Mario theme song playing in my head.
Perfect.
All right.
This is the final lap.
Oh God. There is actually a song for that. It begins with a. Anyway, moving on. Number 2. What is your least favorite word?
Moist. I'll go with a classic.
To know that even in Maine, as behind the times or as classic old school as they might be, you still don't like the word moist.
That's universal.
The thing with moist, though, is how do you describe a cake then? When it's chocolate cake and it's lovely and it's moist. So if you don't like the word moist, how do you describe the chocolate cake? Wet?
Delicious. Rich.
Delicious.
Yeah, I think wet is fine. I think that's fine.
Oh, really? Oh, you know what I could really go for is a piece of wet chocolate cake. I don't think that's better. I think that's worse. Oh dear. But if anyone watching can give me an answer to that, because moist is used specifically with cakes. So if you don't like the word moist, I would love to know what you guys watching at home would use. Any suggestions? Let us know. Number 3, in life, what gets you excited or what turns you on?
Competition. It's only fair to say that.
That's fair enough. And what about question 4? What turns you off?
Dishonesty. Very blatant dishonesty. That is a big turnoff.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that one. Question 5. What sound or noise do you love?
Ooh, the piano. In any setting. It's great.
Do you play?
I do not. I've always wanted to learn though, so maybe that is something that I will start doing. Instead of Mario Kart, I will teach myself piano.
You can do both. You can do
At
both.
the same time, actually.
No, Sarah. Don't drive and start playing piano at the same time. It's bad enough as it is already. Why did you crash? I was playing the piano. Number 6. What sound or noise do you hate?
Chalk on a chalkboard. Anything on a chalkboard, that is terrible. I don't like that at all.
That's fair enough. Question 7. What superpower? If you could have any one superpower, what would you pick and why?
The ability to be invisible so that I can just downtime, be alone, go adventure. Nobody needs to know that I'm there until I want them to know that I'm there. Perfect.
I always find the people who answer with that answer are the ones who are very mischievous. They want to get up to no good. It's like, why do you want to be invisible? So I can sneak up on people and listen to their conversations. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Question 8. What job would you most like to attempt?
I would love to try travel photography. I think that would be so incredible. I don't know if I'd be very good, but I would try it. I would try my best, at least. That's all I can offer.
I feel like photography has gotten a lot easier these days because everyone's got a phone and you can just take 1,000 photos. One is probably going to turn out okay. Versus back, 30 years ago, you had film. I don't know if you're old
Right.
enough, Sarah, to remember what film is, but you need to, you have 24 on your film. You need to take it somewhere to be developed. And in every photo,
Mhm.
everyone's eyes are closed.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Just a bit
Okay.
blurry. Yeah. I think I could be
Oh,
all right at it in this day and age, though.
fair enough. Question 9. What job would you definitely not like to attempt?
Being a scuba instructor. Very specific, but even though I grew up on an island and I love the ocean, the idea of drowning or the idea of not being able to access oxygen underwater, no thank you. A hard pass. I will let other people enjoy that.
Sounds like you don't want to be on a submarine either. If being
No.
underwater with no oxygen is
Mhm.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Final question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Wow. That is an incredible question. I think I would want it to be said that I tried my best and that I was making an impact and that people that are still on earth would remember me in the best of light. And then I would love for him to say that the people that I have lost are waiting to greet me.
You are the best Mario Kart player ever.
Yes. I'd like also a crown placed on my head when I get there. So
Dear me. Well, just before we leave it there for today, Ralph here has said, great interview, and guess as always, see you soon, Sarah. I'll send you the map of the Orlando International Airport so you won't get lost.
thank you, Ralph. I appreciate that. He actually just reached out to me, so I'd also like to give him a shout out. I should have done that about 10 minutes ago, but I'm very excited to meet you. Thank you for watching.
Why would you get lost at the airport?
Well, he obviously just listened to Mario Kart, so he knows I can only travel when I have a map with me. It makes sense. I do get lost. He understands.
He's also said, I prefer moist than wet. And Mark here said, hey, plenty of oxygen on submarines. Yes, I went on a submarine here in Sydney. We had one in an old maritime museum. I will say there's not a lot of room, at least in the old ones, because you're quite tall as well, aren't you? I mean, you play basketball,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yes.
there's not much room in submarines. You can't really stand up. Anyway, look, let's leave it there for now, Sarah. I
Okay.
feel like I could talk to you forever about any
I
number of
agree.
topics. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming on, and best of luck in 14 days.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is awesome. We could definitely stay for another hour.
It's been a blast. I will
agree.
keep you on the line for just a second whilst I hang up with the audience, but thanks to everyone for watching, and we will speak to you next time. Bye for now.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Sorority Access is now open, so if you'd like to join an amazing group of women and learn how to be the most powerful, confident, and impactful queen possible, head to thepageantsorority.com. I'll see you there and see you in the next video.